Welcome to the Yoga4Health podcast. I'm Paul Fox.
And I'm Heather Mason, and our topic today is changing the world one breath at a time.
Now, usually Heather and I will have different guests to interview, researchers, practitioners, pioneers of yoga and healthcare, even a few celebrities.
But this is episode one, so we thought we would talk about one of our favorite subjects, us.
Yes, it sounds a bit self-indulgent, but we thought we would share our journey with you and how we became pioneers of yoga and healthcare.
So thank you for joining us, and we hope what we have to say in every episode will inform, entertain, and sometimes challenge your views about yoga. And we also want to hear from you and have our views challenged as well.
So Heather, here we are, episode one, and I think it's appropriate that we hear your backstory first, as you are the founder of the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance, and I wouldn't be doing any of this work if it wasn't for you. So tell us
You always say that.
what drew you into this fascination with integrating the benefits of yoga into healthcare, and how did you get into yoga in the first place?
I had mental health issues from a young age, depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And I'm originally from New York and studied there, although that is not really why I really wanted to be. And in my junior first semester of college, if you're in the US, or university, I studied abroad in India because I've always had this real fascination with the wisdom traditions. And yoga was a required class. So that was my first experience of it. And as an ex gymnast, I thought it was a competitive sport. When I left uni and came back to New York, and I really plummeted into the greatest steps of my mental health challenges, and then chose to leave and moved to Asia. And through quite a circuitous route, ended up living in Buddhist monasteries and ashrams. That is when I realized that yoga was something that was transformative. And after 3 years of practicing intense meditation and yoga, thinking I would ordain as a Buddhist nun, I came to the UK and I did a master's degree in Buddhist studies. And my journey's changed because I had never been able to enjoy being in the world. And this was the first time that I could be here with ease. So I decided to stay. And my life could have gone in so many different directions, but I wanted to share the insights I have had when I was practicing intensely, especially in the Buddhist monastery. And it wasn't possible to convey that to people only through meditation because it was such intense practice. So yoga was a really good inroads. And many other things happened in my life. I trained in various other things because, as you know, Paul, I'm interested in basically everything, probably to a fault.
Well, you
Um,
are the only person I know who reads research papers at bedtime to help you get to
they're
sleep.
fun, better than Cinderella. Um, And so I also trained in psychotherapy. I became a yoga therapist in 2007, which was an emerging profession at that time. It still is, but it's grown quite a lot. And I was specializing in yoga therapy for mental health for 2 years. And then I developed a yoga therapy training school. And it was in my first year of training other individuals, yoga and health professionals, that somebody came to me and said, let's bring this into healthcare. And that made complete sense to me because I was in such a privileged position to be able to go to Asia, practice intensely in that way. And when you have suffered to the depths that I have, and I'm not alone, and you've come out of that, you often want to help others. And so by integrating it into a healthcare system, it's accessible to more people, but also we reconceptualize it and understand its value in physical and mental health. So that was why I wanted this to be such a core part of my life. And the creation of the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance was part of the trajectory of that development. And it continues to grow and would not be possible, Paul, without everything you do.
Thank you. And maybe that's a good time to sort of describe the way in which I was onboarded onto this project with you. So just happily going along, being a yoga teacher, a yoga teach trainer. I trained over 200 teachers for the British School of Yoga. When we met, I was chair. In fact, I don't know if you remember, we had quite an inauspicious start to our relationship because I rang you from the conference and said, are you on your
Oh my
way to
God.
the session that you're teaching in 10 minutes? And you were in London. So, uh, but I liked chatting to you
Thanks
even
for
in that
reminding me
short
of that.
call. Yeah, I like chatting to you even in that short call. And then we really bonded over the years and have an amazing professional and personal friendship, of course. So there I was, and then you decided that the British School of Yoga and me as chair should be involved in the creation of the Yoga in Healthcare Alliance. So I came along to that, and I was absolutely captivated by the vision, and have made it my life's work in yoga, really. Um, shall I say a couple of things about my backstory? How I
Yeah,
got
I
into
mean,
yoga?
I
Yeah,
went into me. It's your turn to go into you. And by the way, everybody, I always show up on time for conferences to speak. This was a one-off.
it was
It needed to
definitely a
happen
one-off.
so that we could connect.
Exactly, it
Go
was
on.
meant to be.
Yes.
So, well, 1995, I was reluctantly dragged along to a 10-day yoga festival at the Yoga4Health Foundation, which was the only, at the time, really the only residential retreat center which had a focus on therapeutic yoga. So a lot of people there had multiple sclerosis, they had chronic fatigue syndrome, people came with chronic rheumatoid arthritis, and people came with cancer and received therapeutic yoga within a residential setting. So almost from my first class, I was helping people in and out of wheelchairs. And my yoga journeys come full circle because I did go through a number of years, those who know me, of doing some quite strong athletic Ashtanga yoga, but I always carried on teaching very sort of healing yoga alongside that. And now that's all I do with the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance classes that I run. So I want to just name check a couple of people who are very influential for me. So I think seeing someone called Yogi Harry, who when I was sort of 33, he was 53, gave an amazing yoga demonstration, sort of jumping from downward dog into kakasana, arm balance, and all this kind of thing, going up
Wow.
into handstands. But the best bit for me was when he overjumped, fell over, cracked his head on the floor, started bleeding from the
That was
forehead,
the
but
best bit, Paul.
he just carried on. And I was obsessed with football, and it's like the great defenders of our time, when they have a head injury, they just bandage up, carry on with the blood stain there. So that's what I needed to get me in. How could this person, so much older than me, be so lithe, flexible, strong, so much more than I was? And that drew me in, as it does a lot of people, until I discovered the much more subtle aspects of breath and movement and mindfulness that all came later. And John and Lucy Scott and Dr. Ruth Gilmore, who was my main anatomy teacher, David Kyle, and numerous other teachers, because we all stand on the shoulders of our teachers and who have come before us. And really what I think we've done, Heather, is, I think it's true to say, isn't it, that we have taken what we have found to be the most useful, the most effective yoga practices, and ones which have great evidence behind them, and tried to present them in a new way, in a way that the NHS would be very happy to recommend their patients to do.
Yeah, and also that the practices have broad benefits for people with a whole host of health conditions, so that what we offer is really scalable as well.
It's really interesting to think about and talk about what it is the NHS needed to hear from you, from us as the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance, in order to accept yoga, and therefore you came up with the idea of these evidence-based protocols, which we use. So do you want to talk a little bit about the kind of things that they were looking for, and how you were able to envision providing them?
Yeah, but I think actually we need to go back just a step, which was that the all-party parliamentary group on yoga in society was created. And we actually formed, or I formed with other directors, the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance at the behest of parliamentarians, so that we would have a way to take their ideas into the world. And so this organization that existed already had, I guess, a certain level of cachet. And at the same time, social prescribing was growing in the UK. And for anybody that's not familiar with social prescribing, it's essentially the prescription of going to an activity and socializing with other people, because we know that social connectedness has such profound effects on people's health. So what happened, it was kind of a two-way street. So we really wanted to bring yoga into healthcare. There's been an evidence base that's strong since before YIHA existed, so a number of years ago, but also the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, in case you're listening from any other country, also wanted to see what yoga could offer in terms of social prescribing. And so we were going to them and they were coming to us at the same time. So,
Uh,
I mean,
uh,
it almost felt fated.
Yeah, and
And
we got that massive break, didn't we? A gigantic break when uh, the West London Clinical Commissioning Group said, well, we are prepared to fund the creation of the first yoga social prescribing program for NHS patients. And we'll fund it to an extent that 300 patients can do it for free in West London. And we will come up with the funds so that Westminster University can evaluate the experiences of those patients at week 1, at week 10, because it was a 10-week program that we decided to run, and 3-month follow-up. And that is still a really compelling read, that study about how impactful Yoga4Health was.
absolutely. And we were so lucky because it's almost unheard of that a government organization will come to a new organization and say, listen, we want you to create this and we're going to research it from the beginning. And we had the benefit of their insight as to what would make such a program successful as well. For example, we got to evaluate it in the community, not in a lab, which was awesome. And that meant that as we were delivering these interventions, we could also make certain changes based on community feedback. And we had one of the leaders of the social prescribing movement also in the UK, Dr. Marie Polly, also talking to us about what would make this program support connectedness and align with these goals and really help people. So, I mean, it feels sort of like it was our life's mission, because things don't often line up that way. And what we created as a result, I think, of our own knowledge, the feedback, all of these things was highly efficacious, which was
It's
awesome. And that is why we're here today. Because if it wasn't, then, well, I guess Yeehaw probably would have just sort of gone,
Yeah,
or we would have had
and
to go
it was a
another avenue.
totally totally amazing time as well, because we had a very short window, and I remember frenetic meetings and there were doctors, there were yoga therapists, there were researchers. We
Mhm.
discussed what we would measure, how it would be measured. We wanted to make sure that the content of the protocol was really sound, that it contained the most effective practices, but also ones that could be delivered to patients who were going to be in a chair or a wheelchair, as well as on a yoga mat. So it had to be really inclusive. And through that maelstrom, that whirlwind of meetings, in less than 2 months, really, we had produced a protocol, received the money, and were planning the first round of classes. And that was an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, it's true. Do you remember? I think I was teaching a class once, and there was patient representative for the NHS who came to say what was going to work. So we got just feedback from all angles. And that, I think, is part of the reason that what we created has been genuinely effective, because we had so much input from various experts about what would be needed within a system and for people's individual health needs. And so, yeah, I mean, I say this without trying to celebrate us too much, but the program that was created is amazing. And the other thing, just to note, is that we designed it for the early intervention of a whole bunch of health conditions that were the primary ones people were presenting with in the NHS, so that we could hopefully change their health arc and also maybe save some, finances for the NHS, which coming from the United States, having a socialized medicine system, I bow down to the existence of something like that. But it's really strange.
Mm. And it is really, really important for everyone to understand that through our creation of that program, we were really trying to work in partnership with the NHS, trying to support them as much as the patients to deliver some of these big public policy objectives that you were just mentioning, like the epidemic of non-communicable disease, the way in which lifestyle medicine, which is just in the short time we've been working in yoga and healthcare, has got really, really quite big now and is on everybody's lips. And that we identified, and in particular, I think you identified the kind of patients. So on the mental health side, patients with stress, anxiety, low mood, mild to moderate depression. On the physical side, people with type 2 diabetes or at risk of getting it, with a cardiovascular risk, and the socially isolated. So these are all the kind of patients who are not seriously ill, they're not in hospital.
Mm.
They may be living with other comorbidities and long-term conditions, but what could really help them, which the program has really shown itself to be able to do that, is to give them some skills, some yoga-based skills to manage their condition, to feel more healthy, to self-care so much better. And in doing that, they're helping themselves, they're helping the NHS, delivering on national policy. And I think this has made our job of sort of selling the idea much easier, even though people haven't exactly opened the bank for us yet.
They did.
Once.
They just don't do it every day, right? But they did. Yeah, and just for everybody that doesn't know what non-communicable diseases are, because we want to reach out to everybody, to policymakers for whom that's everyday parlance, to health professionals, and also to people who have never done yoga and don't work in the health field. So a non-communicable disease is just the opposite of non-infectious. But generally, what we're referring to here are conditions that are the result of lifestyle factors, and therefore they can be altered or better managed, right? Where there are some infectious diseases where you can live throughout your life with, and there are long-term conditions, and also some congenital conditions that are non-infectious that, maybe yoga would help with stress relief, but they would not likely be able to change the trajectory in the same way.
The actual classes and the content of the protocol are really quite different to what people might imagine that there would be in a yoga class, because almost everybody, when you mention yoga, thinks of the postures, thinks of the asanas, as they're called, and they don't think about that much else. Whereas we have a protocol, a fixed protocol of the postures of the physical practices, but we're really not that interested in them. I mean, we really sieved through and picked the best practices we could that would have the most impact on maintaining range of movement, stretching key muscles, developing core awareness, creating space and ease in the body. So it's all there, and that's kind of the original reason for the postures being created, to make the body comfortable for seated meditation. But we're much more interested, aren't we, in the mindfulness, the awareness, and in particular, and I know this is almost your favorite subject in the whole world, we're using the breath. The breath sits at the center of our protocol, just as the way you and I experience yoga and teach yoga is as a breath-led practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. People often think of yoga as the postures, and that's definitely a part of it. And you've just expressed some of the reasons that they're beneficial and what we were also trying to achieve. But the power of breath to work on all of the systems of the body does exceed the power of the postures. And I don't say that because I'm biased, and I totally am biased, but it's just true. Breath has the ability to work profoundly with the nervous system. Breath has the ability to reduce inflammation and work with the immune system. Breath has the capacity to reduce blood pressure. Breath has the capacity to reduce heart rate. Breath, should keep going. Breath has the capacity to improve digestion. And so much of this is linked to breath's capacity to reduce the stress response and its physiological manifestation. And when you teach people to breathe, firstly with awareness, so that they start to understand the relationship between how they breathe and what is happening in their mind and body, and then to how to alter their breath in particular ways that are going to improve their health and ground their mind, you give them a skill, first of all, that's not only globally beneficial for their body, but they can take off the mat. I mean, I think, and that's really one of the things that we wanted to make sure happened, and healthcare wants to make sure that happens, is yes, you have somebody in this class and they do the practice with you, but ultimately it's to take the learning off into everyday life. And to support that, our course has all kinds of different home practices, things that you can do in the chair, things that you can do on a mat, shorter, longer, breath, body based. But ultimately, the point is that the way of living one's life is changed, the way of perceiving situations, and definitely the way of breathing. I'm sorry, you got me on my high horse, so you know that I'm now going to be riding it.
I just talk about breath. It's just like winding up a toy and then off you go. So that was really
I
great.
can energize
Yeah,
my body.
and I think because the other thing we do is teach. We offer a staff wellbeing program, and we've now gone over 900 staff have gone through the program, and I know you're obsessed by breathing in a good way, and you know that I get emails almost every week from the NHS staff we teach, because we teach the staff wellbeing program as well, saying that the breathing is really helping them get the best night's sleep they've ever had. They're using it for stress release. And similarly with the patients, because we've got over 600 teachers all around the UK now, so lots of Yoga4Health programs being run. And we've had amazing feedback about the breathing practices. It really sits at the center of the program and really has the most impact, because they find, as we've always advised them, that even if they've only got 3 minutes, 5 minutes, they sit and do some breathing, some mindful, slow breathing, particularly that long exhale or equal breathing that we teach them. And it has an instant and incredible impact on how they feel in such a short time. So even though yoga is
Yeah.
meant to be done over a long period of time to make progress, as Patanjali tells us in the sutras, we also know
Mhm.
that people can fit it into a busy schedule, because they can really use that as a personal tool to self-regulate and manage their stress.
Absolutely. And the sleep piece, I mean, I think that that's probably the thing that people report finding changes in the first instance. It might be that right after a yoga class, they have some stress reduction, but people are surprised, including people that are not doing it in any way, shape, or form for insomnia. And again, this is because breath has such a profound impact. I mean, if you think about it, right, every single cell in our body requires oxygen to create energy. There is one other pathway to do it, but it's instrumental at the very core of what we are at a cellular level, and then we can also talk about at a broader level, and also what we share with the environment around us. Breath is part of life, and in yoga, right, the word is prana, life force. So yeah, it's powerful, and it's definitely the thing, not just with Yeehaw, but over the course of being a yoga therapist, that I have experienced people take away and say that it is life changing for them. And they could do it anywhere. We could
Mm.
be doing it right now while you're talking. I could be doing elongated breath and you wouldn't even know it.
Yeah. And when we teach the patients, they really appreciate the breathing practices. And even though a lot of them may come thinking, well, I'm stiff and I'm uncomfortable in my body. By the end of 10 weeks, they've kind of got it that the breathing practices are the most useful thing. And just, I reckon we're going to have quite a lot of people who are either dedicated yoga practitioners or yoga teachers listening to the podcast. So just so you really fully understand what we're doing. So we've got this fixed protocol of the physical practices, which you might think, well, 10 weeks of doing the same thing, is that repetitious? It isn't, because everything else is moving on. We kind of use those physical practices and build familiarity so they have confidence in their home practice. And at the same time, each week, the breathing practice is moving on from simple breath awareness practices in the early weeks to elongating the exhale to a version of Ujjayi that we call ocean breathing, to spending the last 3 weeks of the course learning coherent breathing or equal breathing. And all of these breathing practices have amazing evidence behind them, as Heather will tell us all about in another podcast.
I can't say it now.
You can't say it
Kidding.
now. And at the same
But
time,
can I?
we have these weekly themes that are developing in complexity. And Heather, I'll invite you back in, because the other thing that's different, so we introduce a theme, we teach them a breathing practice, we do a physical protocol, we have a relaxation, we repeat the breathing practice because that's the main thing we want them to practice for the coming week. And then we sit in a circle and we have 20 minutes of sharing and discussion, which is where the social prescribing comes in. And again, Heather was instrumental in creating that. I'm sure has something to say about that.
Well, firstly, this theme, which, if we use less colloquial terminology, it's psychoeducation, psychological education about why we do something. And what we also ensure is that the theme of the week and the breathing practices link together so they're meaningful. So, for example, when we talk about elongating the exhalation, that also links to things like letting go, or we talk about creating space in between the breaths or anything like that,
Breathing up and
or
down from the ground.
up and down from the ground. And we're talking about grounding. So these things link together. And that's not just my iteration. If you classically go back, these practices were not just meant to create physical effects, but psychological effects as well. So we're using them wisely and explaining that. And so you have the breathing practices with the movements, then you have relaxation, then you have the breathing practices on their own. And the discussion, which is actually like an organized sharing, and it's important to note that at the end, is really important because that's where people experience the connectedness. I mean, they might feel it on their mat as their nervous systems ease and they feel like, oh, I'm in the room with all these other beings. But when they're sharing together and they're listening to each other, that's where real connection happens. And it's important that I want to say this. It's important to note that not everybody feels that it's easy to socialize. It might not just be that they are alone. That's the reason that they feel isolated. It might be difficult. And what happens in a yoga practice is the nervous system calms so that when they're sharing with other people, it feels easier. And that whole sense of I can change, I can have relationships, I can be connected also arises. And this component is one of the features that makes this protocol different and makes it social prescribing specifically, because we're really driving home that you can be with other people here and you can develop relationships.
And I think a lot of magic happens in that end of class discussion.
Yeah.
Over the 10 weeks, the group becomes very close. They become very supportive. They make a lot of friendships that builds that social connection. But they learn from each other and hearing what others have experienced during the session. And so you're creating a community of learning as well as one of support. And the other key thing I think about the Yoga4Health program, and all kind of good yoga, because we're not seeking to be the exclusive providers of yoga and healthcare, but anyone working with a healthcare patient, you want to create independence and self-efficacy so that they feel confident to use the yoga tools they've learned. I think in a traditional yoga class, because it ends with a relaxation, a lot of people go home feeling a rush of well-being and peace, and they've really enjoyed it, but they can't often remember what they did, particularly the teachers teaching different things every week. And we're saying, no, this is your practice, you're going to own it. And we're trying to build that independence rather than dependence on the teacher. And that makes it a little bit different from a regular yoga class too.
Yeah, and that supports behavioral change because self-efficacy, right? Like taking better care of oneself and finding that internal energy and motivation to do it. When you are honing that, you start thinking, oh, actually, you know what? I am going to go for the salad and not the chocolate. And not because it's a decision based on morals, but you realize, like, I want to take good care of this me. Yeah. And this is not something that is just underneath what we're saying. We very clearly also tell people that we want them to think about what motivates them. And this course is an opportunity to develop their motivational skills. That when you feel differently on your body, and when you also connect more with your body, you often want to take care of your body differently. And that is part of the reason it also shifts health dynamics.
Yeah, and that really came across clearly in the Westminster study of the
Mm.
279 patients, because we took a waist measurement at the beginning of the course on week 1, and it was taken again at week 10. And without us specifically mentioning diet and lifestyle or pushing any kind of approach to that, we found that the patients lost an average of 15 centimeters off their waists. And the explanation for that from the focus groups was people saying, well, I just felt more aware of my body. I became more aware of what I was putting into my body and how I was looking after it or not looking after it. My favorite quote from that, I think, is one of the patients, he said, there's no point doing yoga and then going home and eating spaghetti bolognese and 3 cakes. Not that spaghetti bolognese and cake are anything that we're against.
For cake, I shouldn't say that.
I wanted to also just, because we're sort of drawing to the end of our time for episode 1, I wanted to say a little bit, and I'm sure you want to reflect as well on the fact that it's really important to me that what we teach in the program and in our mission of delivering evidence-based yoga into healthcare, that we're true to the yoga tradition, that we're not appropriating it or skewing it in any other way. And so Heather, you know what a sort of historian of yoga I am, and one of the heroes. There are many heroes in the yoga tradition, but my top hero is Sri Yogendra, who on Christmas Day 1918, in a beach property in Mumbai, delivered the first recognizably modern yoga class. Now, he led a fascinating life, but he left an ashram where he would have been the anointed successor to the guru and said, this isn't my mission. My mission is to bring yoga to the wider society, to householders, to men and women, not just men on ashrams, and to also use yoga for health and not just for spiritual inquiry. And so he created this format of breathing, relaxation, postures, which we recognize so much today, and a model and a template that spread all around the world. He also said it was very important. He's doing this 1918 and then on through the 20s and 30s, where there were a lot of big leaps forward in medicine and science, and saying we must link yoga to the best medicine and science. So we must link up with the medical profession and do research together. And so I feel really, really connected to one of the very early pioneers who came from India and spread the word about yoga and the power of yoga around the world.
Mhm. Yeah. And I agree. And what is yoga at its essence? It's about connection. It's about divesting us of the illusion that we're separate and supporting the process of that cultivation. And disease or dis-ease only feeds that idea that we're separate. and also gets us further lost in suffering. And so by sharing these practices in a digestible way, which, by the way, gurus have always done. You know, I'm a very serious Buddhist practitioner. I lived in monasteries. I was going to ordain. And what they do is look at who's before them and offer a teaching that that person can digest. So in the same way, you know, I mean, I don't see it as appropriation at all. In fact, what we're trying to do is make it accessible in the same way. And I don't purport by any means to be a guru, but at least I'm using that ethos. And I think you are as well, which is meet the person where they are to
Mhm.
spread this. And there is so much suffering in the world. And this is one of the most incredible ways, not our program, yoga, to meet that because it's biopsychosocial, it's spiritual, it's all of that. And so to be able to spread it, to help people to feel well, um, which then also leads to better relationships. I mean, that is not just the spirit of yoga, that's yoga.
And that essential teaching of Patanjali, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, that the purpose of yoga is to settle the fluctuations of the mind. I mean, that sits right at the heart of every single class we teach. I also just wanted to sort of draw everyone's attention to the fact that we're teaching the patients, but when we went to the NHS and partnered up with local GP surgeries, often they would say, that looks amazing. What have you got for us and our staff? So that's why we went on and developed a staff wellbeing program. So now we're in this sort of very, very nice position where we've taught it to a lot of patients. We've taught it to over 900 staff. So we're able to introduce to staff a very authentic and foundational understanding of the purpose and benefits of yoga and the science behind it, so that they feel really confident about commissioning our programs and recommending it to their patients. Because we haven't really touched on this actually, Heather, that one of the big barriers that you identified and that I agreed with completely at the beginning was that yoga is such a broad spectrum of experiences that if you're a medic and you recommended a patient to go to yoga, they might, actually turn up in the class that's completely inappropriate to their needs. A 70-year-old arriving at a Ashtanga Vinyasa class or this kind of thing. So to go in with a protocol and say it's a very predictable, evidence-based experience, and now you know from doing the staff program exactly what it's all about. We've got this lovely confluence of staff and commissioners and patients on the same page.
And that's how it should be. You know, a healthcare system should be integrated. And our health professionals not only need to be convinced, but they deeply need it for themselves. I mean, we all know that burnout is rife within the health professions. And so they feel it within their own body. And yes, then they have the evidence and then they feel that they're doing and fulfilling their duty of care. But, you know, and I want to bring this in. The biggest predictor that a health professional will recommend yoga is not actually the research, it's their lived experience, but the research that makes it easier to say, hey, I'm doing this within my service and mass. Um, and Paul, you do that work. You know, you're the one that is teaching the health professionals, and it's incredible. Um, and it's sort of like working at the top down, so from the system, and then from the patient level, grassroots, and meeting in the middle, hoping that we can expand, I guess, also outwards. You know, I was thinking, we said we were going to talk about us, but we really haven't talked that much about us. I think, though, what's apparent is that us can't really be divorced from this because we live in, my word, breathe this. So, us is this. This is not a job. This is a livelihood. This is a mission. Um, we're a charity, in fact, the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance. And um, we want to help people in a way that we know works for many people profoundly.
I think that's a fantastic note to end on, Heather. Hope everyone has enjoyed the first episode of the Yoga for Health podcast. Heather, any closing remarks from you?
That If you have not tried yoga yet and you're listening, that you can go onto our website. We have free resources, or you can go anywhere. Try it out for yourself. And for those of you coming that are health professionals that may be new to the idea that yoga really can be a health intervention, go check out PubMed and some research. You'll be surprised what the evidence base is, and it's growing and it's growing, it's growing and it's growing. I think that's it for me. You know that I could continue all day, so I have to stop somewhere.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.